Okay, so in our last video, we were talking about the tripartite soul and freedom and deliberation and that kind of stuff. And we said that the soul was divided into three parts of reason, emotion, and appetite. And these parts, emotion and appetite, ultimately amount to distractions. We'll explain that in a second. Whereas this is what is truly human. That is, our emotions and our appetites are not unique to human beings, right? All living things have appetites and all animals have emotions. Therefore, consider a wagon versus a car, right? A wagon and a car, when you think of it, are very similar. In fact, a car has much of the nature of wagon in it, right? It has four wheels, right? It has a rectangular shape, all that kind of stuff. But what makes a car a unique kind of wagon is the internal combustion engine. Wagons do not have internal combustion engines. Cars do. Therefore, a car is that which has an internal combustion engine. So therefore, we may share this stuff with living things, but this is what makes us human. Okay. And also where we're going is that it's this that allows us to think correctly. And that's kind of where we're going to go here now, is this idea of correct thinking. Granted, this might sound a little bit politically incorrect, right? It might be, today people believe that all opinions are valid and that sort of thing. And so it's kind of a challenge to say, well, that idea or that opinion is just wrong. But 2 and 2 is not 5. And it really doesn't matter, how good you are, what a good person, what a good heart, what demographic you represent. 2 and 2 is not 5. And we can't live in a world where 2 and 2 is 5. So let's talk a little bit about that today. One thing that I would like to share with you is Immanuel Kant's What is Enlightenment? This essay was written in 1784, and it's available everywhere. Here's a version that I have. I want to just read a couple of paragraphs. It says, "Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-incurred immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's own understanding without the guidance of another. This immaturity is self-incurred if its cause is not lack of understanding, but lack of resolution and courage to use it without the guidance of another. The motto of the Enlightenment is therefore sapere aude, have courage to use your own understanding." And this is important because this essay captures the entire spirit of the Enlightenment, which was that late 17th and 18th century intellectual tradition in which the idea was that reason would make man's life better. Here's what he says about those who do not seek enlightenment. "Laziness and cowardice," I'm on the second paragraph right here. "Laziness and cowardice are the reasons why such a large proportion of men, even when nature has long emancipated them from alien guidance, nevertheless gladly remain immature for life. For the same reasons, it's all too easy for others to set themselves up as their guardians. It is so convenient to be immature. If I have a book to understand in place of me, a spiritual advisor to have conscience for me, a doctor to judge my diet for me, and so on, I need not make any efforts at all. I need not think, so long as I can pay. Others will soon enough take the tiresome job over for me. The guardians who have kindly taken upon themselves the work of supervision will soon see to it that by far the largest part of mankind should consider the step forward to immaturity not only as difficult, but also as highly dangerous. Having first infatuated their domesticated animals and carefully prevented the docile creatures from daring to take a single step without the leading strings to which they are tied, they next show them the danger to which threatens them if they try to walk unaided," etc. So notice what he's saying here, right? Is that eventually, if we are trained not to think for ourselves, right? But if things are simplified for us, if we contract out, it's interesting how many people now see therapists when I guess it used to be that one would talk to their friends or family, right? How many people, anyway, you get the idea that he's talking about, right? Parenting guides are another great example, right? Nobody talks to their parents about how to raise kids. You have to buy book after book after book by the next PhD, right? Look, if you will, at this paragraph here. For enlightenment of this kind, all that is needed is freedom. And the freedom in question is the most innocuous form of all, freedom to make public use of one's reason in all manners. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about now. Because notice, it's reason, according to Kant and the Enlightenment, that allows us freedom, right? And he means the same thing, because reason is when we think without our emotions and appetites. And that is how we are going to then obviously be free. But notice the connection between reason and freedom. I mean, they go hand in hand. We literally have to get ourselves away from the distractions of emotions and appetites. And these distractions are where all amusements and all that sort of stuff comes from. So I have another thing that I would like to share with us. Look, if you will, at this. What I have here is an assemblage of quotes that I've picked up. I have the references here for this course that are specific to our needs. This comes from a quote. It comes from a dialogue from Socrates called the Gorgias. And what I would like to do is to read this. It speaks to exactly what we just saw with Kant. Socrates. The speeches I make, this is Socrates speaking, the speeches I make on each occasion, do not aim at gratification, but at what's best. Real quick, well, what do we mean by gratification? In other words, what makes us feel good inside, so an emotional appeal. And we all know that, politicians, for instance, or advertisers, or anybody else that wants to convince us of something, will do so with amusement, fear, emotion, anger, whatever gratifies our emotional level. He continues, they don't aim at what's most pleasant. And because I'm not willing to do those clever things you recommend, I won't know what to say in court. For I'll be judged the way a doctor would be judged by a jury of children if a pastry chef were to bring accusations against him. Think about what a man like that, taken captive among these people, could say in his defense if someone were to accuse him and say, children, this man has worked many great evils on you, yes, on you. He destroys the young among you by cutting and burning them. By slimming them down and choking them, he confuses them. What he's talking about is medical stuff, right? Cutting, i.e. Surgeries and operations. Burning, i.e. like burning out warts and that kind of stuff. He gives them the most bitter potions to drink and forces hunger and thirst on them, i.e. by denying them the sugary foods that they want, right? And making them take medicine when they're sick. He doesn't feast you on a great variety of sweets the way I do. What do you think a doctor caught in such an evil predicament could say? Or if he should tell them the truth and say, yes, children, I was doing all those things in the interest of health. How big an uproar do you think such judges would make? Right? So if we go back to what we were talking about freedom, and it's only when we are free of our distractions, our need, for instance, as he was saying with the children, right? The needs for, sugar and all that sort of thing. And we all know, boy, if I tell my children no more sweets, the uproar I get, right? When I say it's time for broccoli, put down the donuts, then I'm going to be the bad guy. There's no question. Because it's difficult to think correctly. And with correctness, we also are talking about health. Because the appetites and emotions distract us away from what we know is good. Because we're seduced, right? We're seduced by the pleasure. Okay, so if we're going to think, and not just health in terms of the body, right? We're also talking about a healthy mind, and we're also talking about a healthy society, right? Like perhaps, for instance, it might be a bad idea to consume huge amounts of high fructose corn syrup because it's linked to the type 2 diabetes epidemic in this country. And yet still, off we go to the 7-Eleven for our super big gulps. Here's another quote that I would like to share with you. And it is from Thomas Jefferson, where he says, this is in his notes on the University of Virginia, which I think he wrote in like I can't remember the year. But anyway, education generates habits of application, of order, and the love of virtue, and controls by the force of habit any innate obliquities in our moral organization. We should be far, too, from the discouraging persuasion that man is fixed by the law of his nation at a given point, that his improvement is a chimera, and hope delusive of rendering ourselves wiser, happier, or better than our forefathers were. So here, when he's talking about innate obliquities, what Jefferson means is the distractions, right? So obliquities refers, right, from geometry, the oblique angle. In other words, you know, here, this is what is true, right here, and here's me, and I'm going to keep moving towards what is true. But the oblique angles move me this way and that way, right? So I am moved away from the pursuit of the truth by pleasure on one side, fear on the other, and various things, right? I mean, we all find pleasure in different things, but the bottom line is it seduces us away. We could also call these sins, right, if we really wanted to. So that, you know, the language of religion is not a whole lot different from what we're talking about here. It's the failings of the flesh, right? The weakness of the flesh. When Christ said the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak, it's the same kind of concept. I'm not saying that Jefferson was Christ. But notice, education generates habits of application and order, and the love of virtue, and controls our natural inclinations and obliquities. And so what is the point of education and enlightenment? It ultimately is to control these guys so that we can think correctly. And especially as a republic, we need to habituate ourselves. Notice he said the importance of habit, right? We need to habituate ourselves so that we're not distracted by this kind of stuff. Otherwise, we will be seduced by politicians who give us emotional bumper sticker sound bites. We'll be seduced by corporations that give us, you know, instantaneous gratification. We'll be seduced by Facebook and social media that constantly pulls our attraction and makes us become addicted to constant changes and videos and likes. So anyway, at the end of the day, what is enlightenment all about? Enlightenment ultimately is about thinking for ourselves. And the best way to think for ourselves is to habituate ourselves to not be distracted. And the next question then is, how do we habituate ourselves? How do we make sure that we can think without the distractions of pleasure and fear?